Let's talk about the behavioral interview. The behavioral interview is a capstone part of many interview processes, whether it's software engineering or not, and helps companies gauge whether you'll be a good culture fit at a company. They also have the secondhand purpose of understanding how you solve problems and how you approach situations that are otherwise challenging. But that's secondary to learning how you'll fit in with the other people at that company already. Not many people are interested in hiring people that won't work well with the engineers, workers, and others that are already at the company because it's much harder to fix someone who has poor culture than someone who's not the best technically. And so, for these reasons, it's absolutely crucial that you ace the behavioral interview. I'll break down the behavioral interview into two parts: rapport and answering behavioral questions. And after we go over that, you should be much more equipped to handle behavioral interviews and ace every single one. Let's get to it. Let's start by building rapport with our interviewer. When we walk into the room, the interviewer is the dominant person in the room and has all the information, whether that's the questions, the format, or even how well you've been doing so far in the day. You don't have much information, and so it's important that you change the relationship so that your interviewer sees you as more of a friend and a peer rather than someone that they're interviewing. To do this, we need to build rapport with our interviewers. The first way that I think you can build rapport with your interviewer in the easiest fashion is to mirror their body language. This isn't just some psychological trick. By copying the body language that your interviewer is showing, you're creating a more comfortable space for the both of you. That's one more thing that you guys share in common, and as a result, you two will feel a little better about each other and hopefully have some mutual respect, whether it's conscious or unconscious. The first tip isn't the only one about body language. The second tip is also about body language, and this time it's using your eyes. Maintaining eye contact with your interviewer does two things. First, when your interviewer is speaking and you're giving them this eye contact, it shows that you're an active listener and giving them your full attention. You're not distracted by other things, and they know that everything they say is extremely important to you at that moment, which will help build that feeling of respect. On the other hand, when you're speaking and giving eye contact to your interviewer, it shows that you're fully focused on the task or question at hand, and this helps them understand how important you find the company or that interview or interaction. Over the long run, this eye contact is going to be hard, and it'll get better with time, and eventually it will be one of your most useful skills, especially to build rapport. The final tip I have is to use your interviewer's name. Don't just say it when you first meet them and when you leave the room. Use it throughout sentences or conversations like you would with a friend. This will, again, build that friendship and trust and respect between you two. And by the end of it, if you do all of these three things, you'll hopefully have built enough rapport and made enough friendship with your interviewer to have them like you. And this is crucial, again, when they determine whether or not you get an offer. Of course, this is only one side of the coin for a behavioral interview. The content of what you say also matters. So let's get into how to answer a behavioral interview question properly and methodically. Behavioral interview questions almost always ask you about a situation you've been in and how it went. For this reason, I always recommend students to learn the STAR method. The STAR method is a ubiquitous interview technique, and it's used not only in software engineering behavioral interviews. Many interviewees and interviewers alike are familiar with the STAR method. So it's not just important for you to know it, it's important for you to be able to use the method properly. The method goes as follows. First, you give the interviewer the S, the situation. Then, you give them T, the task. Third, you talk about the action you took, which is the A. And finally, you talk about the result of all of this. So what was the so what? How did the situation resolve itself or conclude, and what was the aftermath? There are countless articles and videos online about using the STAR method, and I won't be the best at describing that to you. However, I do want to go over a few tips that will help you use the STAR method to your advantage, and I'll go over what the common mistakes are that people make during these interviews, even if they know the method and have perfected it. The first tip I have is to be concise and succinct with your answers in behavioral interview questions. Don't get caught up on one letter of the STAR method for too long. Give 2 to 4 sentences per each letter and let your interviewer ask for additional context. You can even offer up the opportunity for them to ask by saying, I can elaborate further on this if you'd like. Don't drone on and on, because odds are your interviewer probably has more questions, or they have questions about a particular part of the thing you are talking about, and it's important for you to give them the opportunity to ask those questions so you can answer them accordingly. The second tip I have is to be honest during these interviews. That means come prepared with some situations that you're ready to talk about. Because if you need to make one up on the spot or you need to lie about something, it might be obvious to your interviewer and you're only doing yourself a disservice. It's important to represent yourself accurately, and by coming prepared to a behavioral interview, you can do so. While many of my peers have claimed to have gotten away with this, they probably would have done a lot better if they had spent the extra hour or two the day before to just go over some of the situations and give themselves a refresher. So to sum it up, come prepared so that you can give your most honest interview and representation of yourself. The final tip I have is to take your time during these interviews. Because you'll be concise and honest, which are in the first two tips, you'll want to take a moment to collect your thoughts and compose an answer to the question that accurately and precisely answers the question without getting too off topic. If your interviewer asks you about something that failed and you had to go fix, it's important that the majority of the things you say pertain to what failed and you had to fix. Not this was the situation and go on for 20 minutes about it, because that's going to bore your interviewer and it's also going to hide your good communication skills from them. So to sum this up, take your time, think about the question your interviewer gives you. Say, hey, I need a minute to think about my thoughts and compose an answer. And they'll give you it, and this way you can give a much more thoughtful and better answer than if you just start blurting things out immediately after the interviewer asks you a question. And that's all I've got for behavioral interviews. Make sure to build rapport with your interviewers. If you can have a friendship with your interviewer by the end of those 30 minutes to an hour, they're going to be much more likely to vouch for you, especially if you're on the edge. Now, of course, you want to give them good content, so use the STAR method to make sure that you have a well-framed idea that they can understand. And at the end of the day, remember, your behavioral interviews are just as important as your technical ones, if not more important, especially at top companies. So good luck.